Craig Adams here, and I've got a bunch of clips. And I've got a really, different selection of clips from 4 different cameras: A7S, C100, 6D, and 5D Mark III, different moments in the day, different lenses, and different picture profiles. And I'm not sure which picture profiles relate to each clip just because I don't have that metadata, but I'm just going to go through and show you what I do. So in Final Cut X, I will just select the clip, and one of the first things that I actually do is I just test to see what Final Cut wants to do with the clip as far as auto color correct. So I actually click Option Command B, and that is like the balance color you'll see right here. So that just analyzes the clip and then just gives an idea of what it thinks I should do with the clip. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So I can just Command Z to go back. And honestly, for myself, it's harder, I really like warm colors for weddings. I probably won't get too moody, but as far as color correction, it's really just exposure, and if there's any glaring mistakes, I'll fix those. But this looks like it was shot on a 24-105 on a 5D Mark III, and honestly, the auto, hold on. The auto balance for the color kind of made it a little weird, so I don't really trust it. I'm just going to do that one more time. So Command Option B, it made it quite blue. So this is a tricky shot just because there's a lot of window light, so the blue light coming in, you can see on this side of this guy, this wall. And then we also have these really strong blown out kind of tungsten lights. Most of the time I will expose for the skin tone, and honestly it looks like from what we see it's a lot of natural light, so warmer is usually better. So the clip by itself is pretty warm to begin with, but honestly I'd probably go just a tad warmer, just to set the skin tones natural. For what color is actually hitting. So if these get super orange, it kind of works to my benefit in the background because it separates this color from the background quite a bit. So it was just a tiny bit. So you see these values, I always move the midtones when I'm doing color. I don't really affect the highs or the lows for color correction that much at all, if anything. This clip has a lot, the wider shots, especially indoor like this, it's a bit tougher. So, okay, so I already did something wrong. So I'm going to put that back. One tip that you should always do is adjust the exposure before the color, because setting the exposure affects the color. Like it's the correct order for things to go. So this seems like it was shot pretty correctly. I would push the darks a little, and then honestly exposure wise, just the mids up a tiny bit. There's not much. I'm just going by eye just for weddings, and then once I do that I would adjust it to warm it up a little bit. So I'm going to pull this down into the negative, so this takes away the blue. Technically I could achieve the same thing if instead of taking away the blue I came over here and I added orange a little bit, so it looks the same. So but this midtone starts right here, and it's just much easier just to pull it down to take away the blues there. So honestly there wasn't that much to do with this clip, and I feel like that's pretty good right there. So okay, so let's move on. So this is a different wedding, and we have the A7S. So the A7S here was pretty flat, and the biggest thing, so real quick, let's figure out what Final Cut wants to do. that looks pretty bad, Final Cut. You're messing up the colors, and it's still very, very flat, and it looks overexposed and flat. So for this one, I'm going to pull up the color board again. And for exposure, I'm going to set that before I change the color, if anything. So for this picture profile for the A7S, I found that the best thing to do is to drop the darks, the shadows, and then raise the exposure. So I'm going to do a global pull up for the exposure. And then that really pulls the colors back into the image. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to raise the highlights just a tiny bit. And then I like warm images, so I'm just going to warm it up a tiny bit. So once again, pulling down into the blues. So let's look at the before and after for that. So shot pretty flat, low saturation, and then the darks, the shadows are just way brought up. So I'd say that's pretty good. You know, that's typically what I want as far as color correction. So for this clip, for this film, I gave it a bit of color grading. So what I did is I opened Color Finale, which is an effect. It's a third-party plugin that you pull in, and it pulls it into the effects right here, and you click open, and it gives you this new little bar right here. So there's a couple different things. I could technically do all of my color grading in Color Finale, but what I like to do is apply Luts every so often. So if I want to give a certain grade to it, I will use a LUT. So for this wedding, I think I used the Kodak 709 LUT quite a bit. All right, so at 100%, obviously this is pretty intense. So the biggest thing with LUTs is to change the opacity of the LUT. And really what I'm looking for is the change in color. So that's a really, really interesting color, but at 100%, it's just crushing, it's too much contrast. So what I can do is pull it back just a tiny bit because I don't want too much color change. What I can do is go back and fix the color boards a little bit because I made these adjustments. So I can actually pull back on the darks a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. You know, it's a balance between what you want the image to look like and then your feel for the color grade. So just to show you the changing color, it's kind of giving like a little bit of a yellow tinge to the greens, and then also a little bit of a green to the blue sky to give it kind of more of an aqua look, which I like, and it adds a little bit of contrast. So so before and after with everything, you know, it's a big improvement. I really like this look right here. So that's what Color Finale can help with, applying LUTs and really just changing whatever aspects. I can show you more of Color Finale, but here we have a C100 clip. So I'm going to show you what it's like to color correct entirely with Color Finale. So I just select the clip, double click, and then I can just open this panel here. So the first thing I like to do is apply the LUT to look. So let's try the Fuji 709, and it's really good to just like try different ones. They're all quite different, like the Alexa one. But I really, really love the Kodak and the Fuji because they're 35mm LUTs and give really, really interesting looks. So I'm feeling this. That's kind of really, really cool. So the footage was shot quite flat, and we have a lot of latitude. I feel like that is way too, the colors are great, but it's just way too filmy. It's way too crushed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it back to like 90, and then I'm actually going to pull up this three-way color wheels, and this is pretty much the same thing as Final Cuts. So I'm actually going to raise the darks a little bit and then raise the mids. So it gives me that little bit of flatness in the shadows, but also have the color pop. So I think that's like a really well graded, because there wasn't much correction to do. Like outside set with the natural light, I shot it pretty close to what I wanted. So that's a big jump, and it's a balance between making the image look good and not noticing the color, and then grading it in a way that like people notice, like, wow, that looks like film. It's like way different color wise than what it naturally should be. So let's use color finale a little bit right here. So this will probably be very subtle. So I'll open the panel. Shot this with a 5D Mark III. And first I'm going to apply a LUT. Let's go with let's try the Kodak log, and that's crazy. So that adds like a really red look to it. And then this is the one we just used. So I'm going to apply this Fuji. Yeah, let's go with the Fuji, but then let's put it way down because it's pretty close. I just want the colors really to change. And then it seems like we're gonna pull up the color wheels and add a little bit of contrast. I'm gonna bring up because I want to still keep this the detail, the color in that. And what we can also do is move to add a little bit of orange to the mids here. Okay, so that looks good, especially when there are no skin tones. You can really adjust. So this shot before looks a little bit of green, it looks a little flat to me. So with the adjustments, I popped the color, really add a warmth to it, and then that LUT gave it a little bit of a unique feeling. And you can see up in this corner the blue still retained, so I like that. That's important. That's good. Okay, so we have a DJI Phantom 3 Pro here. So I shot this footage in 4K, super flat. So let's just, like, this needs a lot of work to it. So let's just Command Option B and see what Final Cut wants to do. It kind of adds, a little bit of contrast, not enough, and then the colors just seem very green and blue. So I'm just gonna get rid of that whole thing. And all right, so we're gonna open Color Finale on this. And Color Finale is something that you have to buy. You can check the links in the description below to check it out yourself. But with this picture profile for the DJI Phantom 3 Pro, I found that the CineStyle S-Curve gave me a good base. So I applied that, and then that gives me a pretty good base all the way at 100. I like that. And then from there, I'm going to pull up the color wheel for three-way. Going to drop the darks a tiny bit. I think we need to raise mids a tiny bit. And then I want the saturation to go up too. See, now it seems very green to me. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to use this 6 vectors. So I can actually select the green and then change the saturation of just that color. And it makes very subtle changes, but it helps out in the long run. You can see the color in the water. So I want the water to be way more blue. So I'm going to move that to right there. I'm going to keep that right there, and I'm also going to change the blue. Okay, so let's go back to the color wheels, and you can always just test around. You don't want it to be too much. Let's just reset that real quick. All right, pull up the highlights a tiny bit. So that's pretty contrasty. Let's see what that looks like before and after. So I think that's pretty good. It's almost there. It's very contrasty, but that's kind of like what the DJI Phantom does. So I'm happy with that. Okay, So we have another 5D Mark III. This is a pretty tight, it's a very close-up small detail. So this is also a tricky one, because with most macro close-up detail shots, you need to really increase the contrast. But when you have skin tone, you have to treat it a little differently. So what I'm gonna do here is color three-way. I'm going to raise the mids. No, the shadow's a tiny bit. Gonna raise the mids, and then I'm going to bring that up a little bit. And then one thing that you want to do sometimes is you can select this red for the 6, and then you can, because this really affects just the skin tone. So this is a good thing to do if you really want to get rid of that like red disgusting look. So you can do that right there. And then honestly that looks pretty good to me. So this was a very, very small change. But this looks dark to me. This is the focus. If I was using selective areas for color correction, so like just this area versus not affecting the outside, I would just raise the exposure of this so it's more of a highlight. Okay, so this is also the 5D Mark III. This is shot outside and it seems like it's very, very cold. So I'm curious to see what Final Cut wants to do with it. So Command Shift B, it just kind of darkened it a tiny bit. It didn't really want to change that much, but me personally, I need this shot to be warmed up quite a bit. So I'm going to pull up the color three-way, and let's use Final Cut for this one. I want to switch back and forth because some people don't have Final Cut color finale. So I'm going to change the exposure, and I want it to I want a little bit more brightness. So it's almost like we're just going to raise the exposure because it seems like it was a bit dark on purpose though, because the background is blown out. And then the color we're going to warm up quite a bit. So we don't want the color to change too much in the highlights, but just that little adjustment right there is going to make a huge difference. So let's show before and after. That's so much better to me, and this is more color correction versus grading. I'm not really putting LUTs on that. So this is nighttime reception stuff. So this is people entering let's find a good point where it's in focus and not motion blurred. Okay, so let's just see. This is A7S. Let's see what Final Cut wants to do. So Final Cut blues it up a little bit. I actually kind of like that look. I think that makes sense, but we need to change the contrast a little bit. I want to crush the blacks a little bit. So I'm going to open color finale. We're going to check out the curves. So what I can do is just change the global everything a little darker right there. So that adds just a tiny bit. That's all we need. I don't really want to do too much, especially with indoor footage. There's not much to do. Honestly, it's just small adjustments. A lot of people use the color vectors and stuff to scientifically check out, but it's really just whatever feels right. So this is an interior with the C100. A slider shot that just pushes in, and it seems like it's flat. It looks good, but it's pretty dark. So I just want to see so Final Cut thinks it should be blue. I really like the warmth of this shot. So what we're going to do is apply a LUT for this one, and it's going to be trimmed down quite a bit. So let's go with the Codec 709. So that's really, really, really drastic. So what I'm going to do is just add a tiny bit, so like 20%. That's all I want to do. And then for the color wheels, we're going to bring the mids up quite a bit and the highlights a lot, and the darks dark a little bit, just to add that contrast. And I like my images to look like what they actually look like there. So some might say that this is a little dark. I'm even going to bring the darks down a little bit, shadows. I think that's good just because it's natural. You know, I added a little bit of Kodak LUT, but I think that looks much better. It's very warm, but it's pretty good. I love the C100 footage. It's very easy to grade. So this is 6D. You can kind of tell the moire a little bit as you move the clip. You can tell it doesn't handle these patterns quite well. Let's just see what I shot. This pretty standard. You know, my saturation, my picture profile for the camera was pretty close to standard. So Final Cut wants to make it this weird green color. So I'm going to open color board, and I want this to be just a tiny bit darker. And then I want, because it's a detail shot, I want a lot of contrast here. And color wise, let's warm it up just a tiny bit. This doesn't need that much at all, but these slight adjustments really do make a difference. Off, on, off, on. Slight adjustments, I gotta make them. Like, I don't feel right if I see that clip and it doesn't have it. So this is shot pretty close to standard with a 6D at a reception. And let's just see what Final Cut wants to do. So Final Cut really messes with the skin tones and tries to trim down on the red. But honestly, like, I really like the look that is natural to what it felt like there. So I'm going to just kill the saturation a tiny bit. Going to take back on the red a little bit. So I'm going to pull over to red. I'm going to get rid of it a tiny bit just to tone it down a little bit. And then it's going to raise the brights a little bit. I'm actually going to open up Color Finale and see if I can help these skin tones just a tiny bit by opening this 6 vectors. So select red, saturation. Just want to see what it looks like. So it affects a lot of it just because most of the image is red. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit. So from like ridiculous red to like toned down red, I think that's much better. Okay. And this is an exterior shot, but it's just a focus up on these bulbs. So these bulbs are blown out, and it's like sunset. So there's no skin tones in this, so I'm going to apply a LUT and do a grade pretty well. So I'm going to start with the LUT. We're going to do the Fuji 709, which is going to make it pretty turquoise. Let's tone that back just a tiny bit, but like I said, when there's no skin tone, you can really play with how you want the image to look. I like the shadows to show a little bit of life there, and just gonna up the contrast a little bit. Saturation is there. This looks pretty cool. The bulbs end up being a little blown out. We lose a little bit of detail right here. Notice the gradient. It stops it, so it looks like one color. It looks like yellow and then orange right here versus like a gradient gradually moving towards orange. So that's, you know, the more that you grade, the worse the image is going to get as far as detail. But I think this gives a really unique like orange and turquoise kind of look to it. It's pretty cool. So this is the A7S. And just to show you, this is from the same wedding we shot over here. So I'm just going to copy Command C and paste. Sometimes you can do this, but in this case it probably will not work. So I Shift Command V, bring up this, and I can just send over exactly just that attribute. So in that clip we pulled the shadows down quite a bit and then upped the contrast. So you'll notice like a little bit of a yellow tinge to the hand and the skin tones, and then it seems to me like the shadows are just way too crushed. So I'm going to open the control panel. I'm going to bring up the color wheel. We're going to put it below all of that, and I'm just going to raise the shadows and the mids a tiny bit. And then for 6 vectors, I'm going to pull down the saturation on the hand. So just to get a little less saturation on this hand right here. And that looks pretty good to me. Let's turn that on and off. Yeah, looks pretty good. So this is a 6D on a slider, detail shot. A lot of it's out of focus, and this was shot very close to standard. So there isn't much. Just a personal thing. I just really like, well, first off, let's see what Final Cut wants to do. I think it raises the shadows a little bit, but we don't want that. We're going to show the color board. You really can't trust Final Cut yet. I think they're getting better. So once again, just add a little bit of warmth to the image, and then I'm just gonna pull back on the details on the shadows a little bit, just because that's a personal touch. Very subtle change, just because I shot it pretty close, but honestly, I think that makes such a difference. Like, I just like that image so much better. Just like the before and the after shows it a lot. So this is a 5D Mark III shot with a very odd picture profile. Seems very, very flat. Pretty close to Pro Lost, I would say. So let's see what Final Cut wants to do. There seems to be like a really odd yellowish to this image. So, all right, we're going to open color board, and we need to pull down the shadows quite a bit, add a little bit of contrast, I'd say even more, and then saturation, we're gonna pull it up, and then color wise, I think we need to add blue. Just a tiny bit. So this is more difficult. It's not the best shot, it doesn't have the best light, but these changes really do help it in the end. But yeah. Okay, so we color corrected all of those. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below. And I'd love to hear if you have any ideas on how you color correct, because it's different for everyone. But until then, thank you for watching. See ya.